Hey guys, welcome to another one of my reviews. Today I am going to be reviewing the latest film that is written and directed by Quentin Tarantino, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And in case you're wondering why on earth I have these two films from the 60s up here, I'll explain when I go into the plot. You see, the film is set in the year 1969 and it follows Leonardo DiCaprio and Brad Pitt as they play Rick Dalton and his stunt double Cliff Booth. You see, Rick is a struggling actor who is having a hard time trying to be able to make it into the movie scene because he's mostly been relegated to guest spots on other people's shows. And Cliff is his longtime stunt double and his best friend. You know, they've worked with each other for about 3 years. So they decide the fact that they're going to break into Hollywood. However, recently, Rick got a new next-door neighbor in the form of Sharon Tate and Roman Polanski. Now, one thing I do want to mention real quick is the fact that this film is set around the time period of the Charles Manson murders, in which Charles Manson and his followers murdered a lot of people. And there was one particular night on August 9th, 1969, the followers of Charles Manson ended up going into Sharon Tate's home while she was about 6 to 7 months pregnant and ended up killing her and her friends and her friends that were also in her house as well. And they also took her blood and wrote the word pig on the wall with her own blood, which is very disturbing. Now, one thing I also do want to mention with this film, it's set in an alternate 1969. So, it's still technically 1969, but it's a different version of 1969. And let's get at this out of the way real quick. What are the positives of this film? The performances of almost everybody involved are great. Leonardo DiCaprio is really able to convey Rick Dalton as this actor who's struggling to try and find a part, and he really is trying to get out of that, slump and become a big actor again. Brad Pitt is easily my favorite character in this whole film because he's responsible for a lot of the funniest moments in the movie, and he's definitely one of the coolest characters. And not only that, but his dog is just great. Margot Robbie, I thought she was good as Sharon Tate. The way that they were able to capture her look as Sharon Tate is dead on. It's so spot on. It's actually kind of scary about how well they're able to capture it. You also got Al Pacino as Rick's agent, Marvin Schwartz. You also got you got Bruce Dern playing George Spann, the owner of the Spann Ranch, where the Manson family ended up living at. And fun fact, originally Burt Reynolds was supposed to portray that role, but tragically Burt Reynolds ended up dying before he could be able to film any of the scenes, which is very interesting because there are two things that I want to mention that involve Burt Reynolds with this film. One, the characters of Rick Dalton and Cliff Booth are based off of real people. Rick is based off of Burt Reynolds, and Cliff is based off of Hal Niedenheim. For those of you who are wondering who he is, he was the director of the first Smokey and the Bandit, and he also did a couple of the stunts for Smokey and the Bandit. Tragically, both of these people are no longer alive, which is sad, but that's just part of life. And two, there were actually several scenes that were going to be included in the film, but they were cut following the premiere at the Cannes Film Festival. There were scenes in which Quentin Tarantino regular Tim Roth was going to be involved. He would have portrayed the English butler to Jay Sebring, who was the hairstylist for Sharon Tate. There was also a scene in which James Remar would have portrayed Burt Reynolds. And there was also a scene in which Danny Strong would have portrayed one of the supporting characters in The Wrecking Crew with Sharon Tate. And, you just gotta really appreciate the fact about how much detail Quentin Tarantino was able to put into this film because the production values are absolutely amazing. You could definitely tell the fact that this is a film that we do not get anymore. This feels like a film that came out around the late 60s, early 70s, but had a higher production value because the way Tarantino was just able to capture the spirit of hippie Hollywood back then is amazing. And there's also several scenes in which he's able to really capture the aesthetic and atmosphere of what Hollywood was like back then, because there'll be like multiple scenes like you'll see Cliff driving by, and it's very long. You see him driving by a lot of locations, and a lot of people would feel like it's a bit unnecessary, but I really enjoy them because they really get They allow you to breathe in the atmosphere and really take in the fact that this is like 1960s Hollywood. I also really enjoyed the camaraderie between Rick and Cliff because, there's a specific scene in particular in which, they're talking about, there's going to be an episode of a TV show in which Rick made a guest spot on, and him and Cliff are just casually talking. And one thing that I do want to mention real quick is the fact that a lot of this movie does involve just two people, maybe more, just sitting down in a room and having conversations. There is more to it than that, but for the most part, that's what a majority of the scenes in this film are. But the dialogue is so well written and the acting is really good that you're willing to excuse that. But in fact, in these scenes, it doesn't feel like much is really happening. And many people that I know who have seen this, and many movie critics have compared it to either The Big Lebowski or Seinfeld, in which it's like not a lot of stuff is really happening and you could have easily cut a lot of stuff out. But I really do appreciate the stuff that was included in the film, as it just builds upon the atmosphere of the world. Not only that, but the first act and the third act are incredible. They're both great. The second act is okay, but it does kind of feel like it sort of is dragging along at like a snail's pace. It could feel like it'd be dragging at a snail's pace because this is a very long movie. This is about 2 hours and 40 minutes. So it's definitely a bit on the long side. So if you're willing to not worry about the runtime and just enjoy a really good movie, I recommend it. But yeah, that's one of the many negatives that I have with it. I also didn't feel like the fact that Sharon Tate really had a purpose to the film, except to remind you that Sharon Tate is in the movie, and the fact that, she existed around this time period, around the Manson murders. And yeah, there's that. But one other thing that I really want to talk about is the ending. And I'm going to say that for the spoiler section because, man, it is intense. So, even by Tarantino standards, this feels like it's ridiculous. But, yeah. So, overall, I really enjoyed Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I thought it was well written, well directed, well acted. Really love to be able the fact that Tarantino's able to capture the spirit of 1960s LA, because he actually was around during that time period. He was 7 years old when during the time period of hippie Hollywood, as it's been called. So overall, I'm going to give Once Upon a Time in Hollywood a 9 out of 10. So now we get into the spoiler talk. Now, the film actually is split up into like two different parts. There's one part in which you see one that's set during February of 1969, and then another part is set in August of 1969. You see, Cliff is having this conversation early on with Marvin Schwartz, and he's talking about, Rick, you gotta be more than this. I know a guy who you can go to Rome and film some spaghetti westerns there, but Rick thinks that spaghetti westerns are at the low point of his career, and the fact that, spaghetti westerns are not great. In fact, there's even a conversation with him and Cliff. Cliff's like, come on, can't you at least name like one have you ever seen one spaghetti western? And it's like, I've seen enough, okay? And you do get the sense that when Rick Dalton is on the television show Lancer, he is legitimately trying his best. Also, really thought it was cool the fact that Luke Perry was in here. R.I.P. God rest his soul. But, yeah. And there's also a scene in which Rick Dalton is talking to Timothy Olyphant's character about how he almost got the role of what Steve McQueen was going to be playing in The Great Escape. But sadly, he didn't get it because McQueen ended up stepping back in. And you actually see a scene from The Great Escape interspliced with him talking to Timothy Olyphant's character. And it is actually like Rick Dalton in the role. And they probably just like CG'd Leonardo DiCaprio over Steve McQueen. But you gotta admit, it's pretty impressive special effects trickery, I would say. And, yeah. And then eventually, he flies over to Rome. He films a couple movies. Him and Cliff go back to Hollywood, realizing the fact that their partnership has probably come to an end, so might as well enjoy while they still can for at least one night. And they end up going for drinks. And it was around this time that Sharon Tate happened to be home and her friends. And then something interesting happened. You see, members of the Manson family were planning on killing Sharon Tate in her own home. But then Rick ended up hearing some noises outside, and he ended up yelling at the members of the Manson family, you know, if you're going to be planning on smoking like a joint or something, you might as well get rid of that stupid muffler. Not its exact words, but you get the idea. And then eventually one of the Manson family members realizes, wait a minute, that's Rick Dalton. That's, he was on the show Bounty Law, which is the fictional show within the movie, which Tarantino's actually said the fact that he wanted to be able to get, like, Bounty Law as a real show, which I'm actually down for that. But anyways, they're like, wait a minute, what if instead of killing them, we kill the people that inspired us to kill? And then they're planning on killing Rick Dalton. And then but instead of encountering Rick, because he's out by the pool listening to music, they encounter Cliff, who just prior to this, he ended, like, months prior in February, he ended up getting a cigarette that was laced in acid, and when he smoked it, he just began to sort of like start tripping. He was tripping balls, essentially, as a lot of people would state. And then Cliff's like, "Hey, wait a minute, I know you, Span Ranch." And then it's like, "What was your name?" or something. And then Tex ends up saying, "I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work," which was what the real life Tex ended up saying, you know, to one of the members of one of the friends of Sharon Tate. And then it looks like they're about to kill him, but then they're about to kill Cliff and Rick's wife, who he met during his shoot in Italy. And then you hear Cliff go, and then you see Cliff's dog just attack one of the members of the Manson family. And then you see another one of the members, they're just charging at him with a knife. So he takes the can of dog food he was going to get to his dog, threw it in her face without even flinching. And then you just see, like, her face is just almost like it was definitely sort of a bit of a compound fracture. I'm not familiar with doctor terms, but it looked really bad. Like, her face was, like, covered in blood. And then another members tried to kill him as well. However, while he did get stabbed, it was in a place in which he could easily recover. He ended up taking her, slammed her head against a glass thing containing like one of Rick's posters, and slammed her against the coffee table over and over and over again until eventually she just died. And then eventually, you know, Cliff's dog was able to eventually kill Tex. And then another one of the members ended up crashing through the window. Rick ended up hearing it, and then he realized about what was going on, that this person was trying to kill him. So, early on in the movie, you see Rick talking to Marvin Schwartz about the many movies he was in. And in one of those movies, he happened to have used a flamethrower in. And he ended up, you know, using it to sort of, you know, he actually did learn how to use a flamethrower. He ended up going to his tool shed, got his flamethrower, and burnt her to a crisp. So, yeah, those members of the Manson family were now dead. Cliff had to go to the hospital to be able to take care of that stab wound that was in his leg, but he would recover fine. Also, I do want to apologize if you hear any background noise. I'm currently filming right now. Hold on 1 minute, and I'm just going to go quickly take care of something real quick. Sorry about that, I had to take care of something real quick, you know, because of background noise. And then, back to what I was saying, Jay Scheiberg ended up, who was outside, saw Rick Dalton. He's like, "Hey man, are you okay?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm fine." He's like, he's playing it off like super chill, and he's trying to be super calm. And then it turns out the fact that Sharon and Roman Polanski and Jay Scheiberg and all those other people, they were like huge fans of Rick, and they were actually asking him, "Hey, do you want to come inside for drinks? Because it seems like you've had a bit of a rough night." And he's like, "Yeah, I think that would be nice." And then you see him walk over to Sharon Tate's house, and then that's just when the credits start rolling, and it's like, wow, some ending. That was ridiculous. Even by Tarantino standards, this was gruesome. Like, Tarantino's always been known to have gratuitous shots of violence. Like, there's, of course, the scene in Reservoir Dogs in which he cuts the guy's ear off. Mr. Blonde does. There's also, of course, the many scenes in Kill Bill. There's also the stuff in Death Proof in which Kurt Russell's stuntman Mike ends up killing all the girls by crashing his car into their car. But man, this was intense. And I also gotta mention real quick the fact that this is probably Tarantino's funniest film. And not only that, but the ending that it sort of gives off is almost sort of like a fairy tale kind of ending. Because it starts with the words, once upon a time. So, in a way, this is sort of like a modern day version of a fairy tale. And it even kind of gives us a little bit of a hopeful, happy ending. Supposedly, in this version of 1969, Sharon Tate went on to have her baby and she continued her acting career, which was really cool. So, yeah, that was just me pretty much talking about how, just going by like a scene-by-scene basis of what happened near the ending of the film, which I literally ended up seeing this last night. It was like I started like a 6:15 showing. It ended by about like 9:20. And I gotta say that was definitely worth it because that was an amazing film. I gotta give props to Tarantino for that. So, yeah, this probably might be my favorite Tarantino film. I don't think it's his best film. I think he's probably made better, but I really personally enjoyed this as my favorite because of the way that they're able to capture the spirit of the late 60s aesthetic of Hollywood. And also, the performances by everybody were just really well done, and how they were really able to capture the spirit of each character. Like, Mike Moe portrays Bruce Lee, and he does a really good job of being Bruce Lee, which is awesome. And the fight that he has with Cliff Booth is actually also really cool as well. So, yeah, that was my little discussion of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Tune in next time for, I don't know, I might review Hobbs and Shaw, but then again, I don't know for sure because never really been one to get into the Fast and Furious franchise, but we'll see. So, until next time, stay gold.